Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 32 of Dirtmasters, the review series for the real rally cars that are available on GT6. And in this episode we're featuring the 1974 Mitsubishi Lancer 1600 GSR rally car, where the legend of the Lancer began, and this is the cheapest full spec rally car in the game at 50,000 credits, significantly undercuts all of the other rally cars on price, but it's also one of the least powerful, and it's a rear wheel drive car which we've seen before in this series can prove troublesome on certain track types. So how does it compare to the other rally cars, both old and new, that are available on the game? Well, let's go to the track to find out. Now, obviously being a lesser powered rally car, it's not surprising that this Lancer does fall behind many of the newer rally machines in a straight line. So for acceleration, I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 5. Now, for handling, specifically low speed handling, I'm going to give it a 4. And I was actually expecting to give it a strong 5 because of it being a small rear-wheel drive rally car, but the handling actually isn't as great as you'd expect. It's definitely not bad though, so I am giving it a 4 out of 5. And for city tracks in general, I'm giving it a 3 because it's okay. It's not undrivably slow, but it's definitely not as quick as, say, the modern WRC machines, not surprisingly. So now let's see how it takes on a country track. Now, the advantage of this particular Lancer on a track such as here on a twisty country track is its rear-wheel drive and ultra lightweight package, which does make it a very good car to drive on this track. Now, unfortunately, its pure straight line performance does still let it down in terms of overall lap times, but compared to other old rally cars, it's certainly not a bad rallying machine. Now, for top-end performance, again, I'm going to have to give it a 2 for the very reason that I just said. It does fall behind. For high-speed handling, though, I'm going to give it a 4, because although it's not perfect, it does handle pretty well on high-speed tarmac tracks. And for country tracks in general, I'm actually also going to give it a 4, because it does perform pretty well here, especially for its power. So, a reasonable score on both of our tarmac-based track types. But what about on dirt and snow? Well, let's go first of all to a dirt track to find out. Now, it's tracks like this that really put the rear-wheel drive rally cars through their paces, because, as I've said before in this series, the problem with rear-wheel drive rally cars is no matter how much or how little power or weight you have, you just cannot get that power down to the track as well as an all-wheel drive vehicle can, or even as well in some cases as a front-wheel drive vehicle, but especially against all-wheel drive vehicles, and the Lancer is unfortunately no exception. Now, as far as handling, it's not a bad car. It's still quite nimble thanks to its small size and low weight, and it's certainly not difficult to drive. But overall, despite its very healthy power-to-weight ratio and reasonable amount of power, it's just not quick enough to compete with the modern rally cars. And saying that that's because it's an older car just isn't the reason. There are older rally cars which can still cut it by modern standards, but this one just doesn't. Now, many rally cars back then, of course, were rear-wheel drive, and so the competition was more even, whereas today, with the advantages of all-wheel drive, cars like this just fall so far behind, and unfortunately the Lancer does fall far behind compared to the modern rally cars. Now, I'm not saying that it's a useless car on dirt tracks, certainly not, but its range of effectiveness is far more limited than the other modern WRC machines. Whereas with this car, you can really only go up against very, very low-powered vehicles. Even sometimes road cars would be faster than this car on a dirt track. So overall for dirt tracks, I wouldn't really recommend using this car. unless you're up against maybe the Nissan Bluebird rally car, and that's about it really. So an okay result overall so far, not particularly good on dirt tracks where I'm giving it a 2 out of 5 overall, but can it redeem itself on a snow track? Well, let's go to Chamonix to find out. Now, the real advantage of snow tracks for rear-wheel drive rally cars in particular is that whereas dirt tracks require a lot of variation in speed, there's very low speed corners, high speed straights, etc., snow tracks don't vary that much. It's more about maintaining a higher average speed and flowing through corners, and rear-wheel drive does for the most part lend itself to that kind of driving. So overall for snow tracks, this Lancer definitely performs far better here than it does on a dirt track. And overall for snow tracks, I'm actually going to give it a respectable 4 out of 5, because although it does fall behind the modern cars, it doesn't fall behind by all that much. It's only around 10 seconds, which although sounds like a lot, considering how much less power and technology this car has, that's not bad, especially for a much lower PP rally car. Now overall for drivability, I'm going to give this car a 4, because it's not as easy to drive as you might expect, but it's definitely not difficult to drive either. Overall for snow tracks then, it's a 4 out of 5 and a 4 out of 5 for drivability. So a mixed result overall for the Lancer, but now let's finally go back to the garage for a roundup of its very best and worst points. Overall then, it almost seems a bit unfair to compare the classic Lancer rally car to the other rally cars on the game because of just how much more advanced and more powerful they are. But overall, that is the purpose of this series, to compare the available rally cars. And overall, the classic Lancer just isn't quick enough through corners or on the straights to compete with the majority of the other rally cars that are available on the game. With the exception of perhaps the Lancia Stratos or the Nissan Bluebird. Apart from those, and possibly the Nissan 240 RS as well, but apart from that very limited range, it's not all that competitive, which isn't surprising. Now, overall, it's not a bad car in its own right, and against other classic vehicles, especially more mainstream classic vehicles, in the rallying situations, it is competitive. But the problem is that isn't really a highly populated category of vehicle on Gran Turismo, so until they add more vehicles of that type, it's pretty much too much of a niche to really be effective. Now that said, for the money, it's a nice little car, and it's the kind of car which I'd recommend if you're looking to have an extensive rally collection. In terms of its best and worst points, its best point is that for its power, it is actually quite a quick car. On the majority of tracks, it's around 10 seconds or less, with the exception of our dirt track, around 10 seconds or less behind its rivals, in some cases a lot less behind, which for its power and age is very respectable. As far as its worst point, well, its worst point is dirt tracks, ironically for a rally car, because you just cannot get the power down and you spend most of the time just bouncing off of the red line. Overall then, I would only recommend this car to either a specific Mitsubishi enthusiast or someone who's just looking to own all of the rally cars. Apart from that, its range of effectiveness is just too limited. And overall, as a tabulation of all of its scores put together, it achieves a rating of 3.1 out of 5, which is not awful, but obviously not that high. So as always, I'll put this car's specs, ratings and lap times in the video description below for you to compare it to the other cars of the series if you need to. And that's it for this episode, so I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.